And we are so fortunate to have Intercommissioner Robin Kitty this morning. And she's popped in to say hello. And so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kathy. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I have a schedule today, like many of you, where you are running as fast as you can, kind of keep up with the next place you're supposed to be. But I did want to come in and say thank you for serving on the committee and to tell you a little bit about the things that are going on at the Department of Education in just a few minutes. Recognizing the gifted and talented education kind of spot that you all sit in, it's really important that we select the next commissioner of education who is someone that understands the needs of the gifted and talented student population. So, of course, that is on our agenda, as well as just finding a well-rounded education person to lead the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So I thought I would share with you that we are in the process of our search. We have had we are receiving applications right now, and February 16th is our deadline, our closure for applications. So it is quickly upon us. It's next week. So we are really hopeful that we will have lots of good candidates. We are meeting with the Kentucky Board of Education. They have their regular meeting tomorrow. So we'll be talking a little bit. Chair Robinson will be giving a little update on the commissioner search. We are scheduled to start with our first round of interviews on March 7th and 8th. And then we will interview finalists on, I think it's the 17th, 18th, or 18th and 19th. It's very quickly after that. And some people have said, gosh, it's a really aggressive schedule, for us to try to move so quickly. But there is a reason behind the aggressiveness in that schedule. And that is because this is the first time that the Commissioner of Education will have to be confirmed by the Senate. And so we don't want the Senate to get out the door April 15th without a good consideration of our next Commissioner of Education. If we turn out that we don't find the right person for that fit, of course, we won't move ahead. But we really hope that we will find the next commissioner and be able to send that name over and get confirmation by the Senate by April 15th, which is sine die, when they will conclude. So that is probably the biggest thing on our horizon right now. The other things, of course, that we're working with local school districts on is our United We Learn initiative. And, that's where Kentuckians from across the Commonwealth have really been talking for the last 3 years now about what we want to see in the future of education here in Kentucky. Part of that is vibrant learning experiences for each and every child. And so I know that is something that you all are passionate about in your role of gifted and talented education. Vibrant learning experiences that really are make our kids want to come to school and enjoy being there and learn. So we're working really hard on that. Innovation, especially in our assessments. And so necessarily, if we're changing the way we deliver that instruction and creating those experiences, we may need to look at how we assess that to make sure we're being successful. So that's the second part. And then finally, more engagement with our communities. So not only looking at what we want at a statewide level for our students to be able to do, but also looking at our local communities and saying, what do our local communities expect from us as school districts and students? So those are the three big pieces we're working on. And when I was asked to serve as intercommissioner, that was one thing that the board stressed, that even though I'm here for a short time, progress still needs to happen. And so we are moving forward in all those initiatives that are underway. And also, the other thing that they asked me, which was really easy to support, is making sure each and every child has those opportunities. So looking to make sure that it doesn't matter your background or your walk of life that has brought you into the schoolhouse doors, but we are there to make you successful, whatever it takes in whatever manner. So again, I think that's applicable to what you're trying to do in gifted and talented. So I apologize, I can't stay longer. Kathy's already given me the date for your next meeting, which is April 17th, I think. So I will get that on my calendar so that I can come and actually spend time through your entire meeting and listen and learn from you all. But I do appreciate you allowing me a few minutes at the top of the agenda to just kind of say hello and to thank you for your service on behalf of the Kentucky Department of Education. And please call me. I have lots of people calling me and emailing me with issues. Some people, I am a short timer, hopefully. Hopefully I will work myself out of the job and hand the reins over. Our goal is to have someone in place to start on July 1st. So, but in the meantime, I'm happy to talk and receive emails and phone calls and be able to pass along information to the next commissioner when he or she is ready to work for us. So thanks again, Kathy, for inviting me, and thank you all for having me for just a few minutes.
And thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
And have a great meeting.
We'll see you later.
Yes.
At the proclamation.
Yes, I will be at the proclamation. See you there. Yes, I'll be there.
Thank you. So Lindsay's not here yet. She's our secretary. I think maybe that's gonna be Lindsay. So do I have anybody that would be willing to just kind of summarize what we talked about today, is the big blocks of things?
I can type.
Okay, thanks. Do you want me to send you the template, or do you want to just?
Why don't I just type it in the middle, let her summarize?
Yeah, then you can just send it to me and I'll edit it. Thank you so much. That'd be great.
You
Thank
prefer
you.
Word?
No, just the big ideas that we.
I mean, it's Microsoft Word?
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought you said word for word. I have to have my songs on here games up there. All right. So thank you again for coming today. I don't think we have a quorum. Look at 1, 2, 3, 7, 8. So we need 10 for a quorum. We thought we had a quorum, but then this must be the season. Oh, nice. Tonight, that's good. There's Lindsay, so Kurt, you don't have to worry about taking. But thank you for offering. That was very generous. Lindsay, we're so glad to see you, as you can see. Hold on. Yeah. So Lindsay, I'll just catch you up to speed. Intercommissioner Robin Kinney just popped in. She wasn't on the agenda, but she popped in just to say hello and let us know about the search for the commissioner and everything. That was very interesting. I learned some things there that I hadn't known before, so that was good. So anyway, we will move on ahead here. Let's see if I can break this. So we'll start then with our introductions of members and roll call. Oh, let me just back up a second. So Steve, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Veronica, I don't know.
That's okay. We're all,
I'm just excited.
Robin got us all excited.
I'm just excited. That's what it is. Sorry about that.
So, Robin did a great job welcoming everyone. I will not do that again because she did an awesome job of that. But I will say, I hope that many of you will join us later today. It is such a fantastic ceremony. If you've not been there before, I've had the pleasure of going for a couple of years now, serving in this role, and I just enjoy it so much. I enjoy hearing from the children and seeing what they're doing, and it's just super exciting. So if you are able to join, please join us there because it's an awesome opportunity. I'm going to share the purpose with everyone once again. The State Advisory Council for Gifted and Talented Education is hereby created and attached to the Kentucky Department of Education. The council's purpose is to make recommendations regarding the provisions of services for gifted and talented students in Kentucky's education system. So just a reminder of our purpose before we get started.
Okay. Thank you, Veronica. I appreciate that. It's always good to focus in what it is we're here for. So Misty's going to go over the norms for today's meeting. Okay. Members to speak when called on for roll call or any voting. Reminder to stay focused on the topic agenda at hand for the sake of time. Additional feedback is provided through the meeting exit slip. The secretary takes notes and I will store them and manage the documents. And just a reminder that your travel vouchers are to be submitted through email, and they are going to be due by March the 6th. Now we're going to have the introduction of members and the roll call by Dr. Roberts.
So I shall call roll. Here we go. Katie, but here. Shanice Rapture. Lindsay Burton. Here.
Excuse me, here.
Kimberly Code, Randy Corbett, Paulette Covington.
Here.
Byron Darnell,
Here.
Mason Dyer, Hannah England,
Here.
Kirk Hayes,
Here.
Jessica Hastings, Philip Cash, Jean Lee.
Here.
Tiffany Marshall, Brenda Martin, Harry Ballinger. Here. Is that how you pronounce your last name? Thank you. Robert here, Kim Middleton here. Jennifer Fraser. And that is.
By the way, Ms. Braker has taken another job. She's no longer with the Council for Post-Secondary Education. And so we're hoping that Trinity Marsh, she was kind of for point of contact, but the person she appointed to come in her absence, that maybe she'll be able to take on that role. So we'll be in communication with her. But you know that. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the priorities, and we can, look at them and edit them, I guess, if you want to, but we won't be able to. I'm sorry, you guys. I keep looking ahead. I bet. So we've got the minutes, and you can look over them. We won't be able to vote on them, but you can look over them and just see if there are any edits or changes that need to be made. These were sent in emails, so maybe you've already had a chance to look over them. We've already had some edits that we need to make, but we didn't have a quorum on our last meeting either. So that's why you've got two sets of minutes. Anybody see any edits, revisions that need to be made? Any discussion about anything that you see? If it's all right with everybody, we'll just move on to the next agenda item. So that's going to be priorities. Roberts, I'll point everybody's attention to in your folder that you got today. I made a little graphics organizer. Got the priorities that we voted on back in September. And we can discuss any changes that you'd like to make, but we can't make any motions. We can't vote on anything today. We can just discuss those changes that you might like to make. Okay. So, Dr. Roberts, I'll hand it over to you.
So Kathy, are the priorities here, and I'm just not saying.
They're in your folder. They're in a graphic organizer that looks like this. And on that gray folder. They're right behind you, Dr. Roberts.
They're behind.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's what I didn't.
Anybody else need one?
Thank you. I knew them, but I sure like to read them. Okay, I'm sure.
So got him up here on the screen.
In looking at the priorities that we've set,
Mm-hmm.
I would like very much for us to think about them in terms of what the actions be that would come out of them. Are they big enough in order to recommend actions? Occasionally, I think there's something that's pretty cut and dry as priority, but that's what you do. And that's all. So as we look at them, let's talk about them for a moment. Equitable resources across districts. Educating teachers and parents on identification and recommendations for students showing leadership characteristics. So we've got resources, we've got leadership, there's plenty of 5 areas of giftedness, which release more than 5 areas if you break out the academic areas and the visual and performing arts, but that's one of them. And the third one is equitable funding for socioeconomic geographic groups and districts. Is there anything that you think would, if we're going to be talking about priorities for a couple of meetings, is there anything that you would want to add or change about any of those?
being removed a few months from our last meeting, it, I forgot or I guess I just didn't remember the difference between priority 1 and priority 3. Because for me, funding is a type of resource. So I'm wondering if that could be combined and then defined through recommendations. Because 1 and 3 just seem very similar to each other.
Other comments on that point? And after we've discussed it, we certainly can take a motion to make any changes. Sometimes if you're reflecting after a time, in this case, a couple of months, things look a little different today, and you may have gone home thinking about priorities and how it works. And if you haven't thought about it, we can think about it when we're here together. So if we're to think of a year-long discussion on the advisory council, is this what we want to be the focus?
I just have a question for the group, not necessarily proposing. Okay. So number 2, it's been probably 15 or 20 years since I studied at the Center for Gifted Studies. Number 2 was there way back then. Maybe in the age of post-COVID living and in the age of technology, we maybe should consider what identification looks like and what services look like. Not necessarily advocating for a change, but a really deep dive look at what that looks like for learners today. And I know the center has research on the excellence gap. So just a consideration, and maybe swap out, I agree with Paul, and maybe 1 and 3 could be combined. If you want it, just asking the group.
And so, Kurt, are you thinking that 2 is larger with identification than just looking at leadership?
I think that as a state that we missed identification opportunities.
Other thoughts?
I would agree that leadership, number 2, limits just the view of one particular category, and that maybe a broader view of that would encompass more students, especially when we're talking about equity.
Would agree that 1 and 3 perhaps need to be combined. Because if the funding is more equitable, then school districts would then in turn utilize resources more equitably if they have the funding stream to do so.
So maybe that just could be equitable resources and funding across all socioeconomic and geographic groups and districts.
And Kim, are you making that as a motion?
Yes, I am.
Well, we
did
Sorry, we can't make motions today because we don't have a quorum.
Oh.
Just make the suggestions.
Yeah, we can discuss, but we can't make any motions accordingly today. We're 1 person short. So
It's kind of awkward.
Is there any need to think about maybe broadening it, not just to like equity in the resources, but like raising the resources? Because you can have a small pie and equitably distribute it and still maybe not get the result you want. Whereas if we try to include the idea of like advocating for, as we always want to do, like increased funding would that be something that would change that priority so much? Or do we really want to like make sure that like your district or my district have the same ability to provide? Because I know you've talked a lot about the limits there, which are daunting. So does it change it too much or?
Well, how, you can vote.
I tried to message you, but they wanted me to authenticate. It was a hot mess. So it is here. Thank you.
Okay, let me go back. Yes. Do you want to make the motion?
So I would make a motion that we change merge 1 and 3 to equitable resources and funding for all socioeconomic / geographic groups / districts.
Is there anything in Katie's suggestion to add to that?
So I think if we could mesh the two.
It provides action.
If we switched our motion around just a little bit instead of equitable resources in funding, and maybe this just is in my head words, but equitable funding and resources, because I see that a little bit differently. I do almost see it as two separate things, but I think it's great to merge it, but I would equitable funding and resources, because I think in some parts of the state, it costs more to have the same. So I think in some cases, it may take more funding and it may take more money to get those resources. So in my mind, and maybe it's just my mind, I was thinking if we just switched those two terms. It puts the emphasis on the funding, and then with the funding, that makes it, it makes it possible for equitable resources.
Placement matters. I agree with you.
So I'm gonna just use this chart paper up here to write down what you're saying there so that.
And thank you for doing that.
Exactly what you said. Just switch resources.
That's fine. Well, and I was wondering if we could advocate for.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always.
If I may add a suggestion, I agree with Gary, including the funding of gifted and talented education. Perhaps that could be the top priority. And then number 2 would be Jean's and Tim's suggestion about the equitable funding and distribution of resources. And then the third priority could be regarding the educating teachers or identification of and recommendations of students.
Sure, understand.
So number 1, I think should be funding. I think if I were to prioritize the priorities, I think without funding, we may not have the other opportunities to pursue those priorities.
So you're not just saying that funding should be equitable, you're saying we should have an overall increase in funding, which I think everybody.
Correct. Because I know last year we were approved, is it $10 million? But our goal is 26 million.
The ask that Cage is making is for
24 million. So
that
In
counts
increase.
sometimes.
to support and align Cage's ask, I think I would like to see that funding is number 1. And then the distribution of that funding and the allocation of the funding and distribution of resources be number 2. And then the third would be the educating teachers and parents on the identification.
We vote on Kim's motion now. Do we have enough people with?
So it
So
sounds,
we have that like,
yeah, we had a motion.
so we might need to resolve that one and then you can make.
Yeah.
So
So,
mine was to merge the two,
right,
rather than keep them separate.
right. So after you have a motion, you should have a vote and then you should have discussion. So we've gotten a little bit out of order then. So,
Actually, you have a motion, the discussion, and then the vote.
oh, okay, okay. So, make the motion, all right. So
So is there discussion of the motion or clarification?
That was just my question, because she just made a motion to combine the two, but then I feel like this is a separate motion after those are combined. We might need to.
Okay, all those in favor of Kim's motion, say aye. And those, well, I think we're okay. New motion.
what would the new motion be?
So the new motion would be to reorder the priorities from, well, with Carrie's recommendation, do we, in terms of procedure,
Just how do you want it stated?
can we include or add priority number one to be an increase in funding to support Cage's request for 24 million, but an increase in funding. And then the second priority would be in alignment with Kim and Jean's wording with regard to the equitable funding that hopefully we achieve through priority one. So to say that we want equitable funding and equitable distribution of those resources for all socioeconomic geographic groups and districts.
So you're adding a different priority.
I mean,
Basically, you're more advocating for funding as the first priority.
correct.
Okay.
I suppose that is, yes.
So you're saying, yeah, just general call for funding, priority one. Then two is the combined equitable funding and resources that we just combined, and then we would bump 2 to 3. The former 2 would become 3,
Yes.
correct?
And in three, if you moved number 2 to number 3, instead of just identifying or specifying leadership, would that be all categories, or do you want to stay with just leadership?
I feel like it should be broadened.
That's a lot of emotions.
I was gonna say, I think summarize.
Pauline just needs to state what her motion is, that she'd like to make a motion that priority number 1 is X, for 2 is X, and for 3 is X.
Okay.
And we'll discuss it some more and then.
So perhaps we could do that one priority at a time.
At a time.
Okay,
I would like, then, I would like to make a motion to include an increase of funding for gifted and talented education as the first priority.
Any discussion on that?
She needs a second.
She needs a second, you're
I
right.
mean, also Kim never had a second.
Oh,
Point of order.
Sorry.
Retroactively.
okay, so.
I'll second both motions.
Mr. Ballinger is seconding. Yeah.
is there further discussion on this priority, and do we want a verb with it to advocate for, or so that we kind of have a direction for what we want to do with the priorities?
I think advocate for an increase in funding for gifted and talented education might be better, because otherwise it sounds like, yeah, we're all gonna go out and do bake sales and bring me the money, and put it on Kathy's desk and say, here.
It's-
Sorry, I was gonna say, could we specifically include Cage in the recommendation to know that we are advocating and supporting with Cage? So I feel like there's action to that, that the liaison with the council could work with, well, the Cage council, and whatever they need help in getting that out, whether that's like, I mean, I don't know, like Word, newsletter, communicate, working with the superintendents, like I don't know, that might be pigeonholing us to too small, but like if we say that we will help Cage in support and advocating for funding.
So here's the thing.
Okay.
But I always remember what the purpose is, right? Purpose is that you're making recommendations to KDE about the priority, right?
Okay,
We
okay,
don't advocate, you know, we do want to support in different ways what Cage is doing, but KDE cannot advocate.
okay.
Right, we have to remain a neutral entity across the state, right? And so y'all are a part of KDE, so y'all have to do that too.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So
Yes.
you can ask for increased funding. You can make, you know, that recommendation to KDE. So those funds are set by the General Assembly, and Cage can advocate for that. KDE cannot, you know. The General Assembly can contact us and say, what would be your recommendation? Why do you want this recommendation? You have to support it with data. But we can't necessarily do what you're asking us to do. Am I correct on that?
We use the verb
Or-
recommend. Is that still too?
It depends on what you're recommending. You do want to recommend, because that's the purpose of our group, right?
Recommend.
Yes, but it depends on what you're recommending. We can't necessarily advocate for more funds. We could,
We can request.
we can
Okay,
request.
KDE can request additional funds when that time comes around. We have additional budget request process. So but that's a process that goes through multiple layers, right? But ultimately that decision is not made by KDE. But we do have a process for requesting additional funds. So you could recommend that KDE request additional funds.
One of the challenges that Cage had in coming up with an amount was also data, and having data on how funds are spent and stuff. And it seems to, and I don't know this for sure, but it seems to me that that's where KDE can provide support for requests, like that we could pull that together, so that if there were anybody out there, whether it's Cage or, I don't know, Gifted for America or whoever, wanted some, we would have that, like a body of data or information that could be shared, that then could be used by groups that are advocating for growth. Would that be
So
appropriate?
you can have your priority as, you know, increased funding or equitable funding. And then a recommendation could be that, you know, the SACGTE recommends that KDE, you know, gather data about X, Y, or Z in order to support the need for increased funding, something to that effect.
Because I was just trying to think like, what could be our action with this priority? Like, I feel like funding sometimes, you know, our hands are tied. So like, that's what I was kind of like, if we think big, like priority, okay, what's the action that we can do as a council?
Right, so you want a
that's-
priority that is the umbrella, right,
Okay.
under which recommendations are made, because that's the purpose of the group. Some good discussion there.
And I think Kim provided a start for what is a
Mhm.
recommendation.
Yes.
Go on. Okay, so what's the motion?
My motion.
Your motion was that we change the.
To change the order of the priorities.
So
Keeping
what's one?
from what is up on the screen to support or recommend funding or additional funding for gifted and talented education. For that to be the first priority.
Is there a second? We had a second a moment ago, so this kind of narrow. Is there discussion?
We discussed, I think, right?
Is there further discussion?
Yes, I have a request. Does somebody have a device that we can put the actual language on the screen or we can write so that we know what we're voting on?
Okay, so what is it that you want to say?
Yeah, are we voting on just the order or you're voting on the word?
Voting on the motion, which is the wording that she said,
Yeah.
which is to,
I heard prioritize. I didn't hear word.
To recommend additional funding for gifted and talented education.
And it seems to me like the most important word in this isn't up there, which is how you started. It's-
Recommend.
Yeah, recommend or request or,
well, we're not really into recommendations yet. We're just doing the priorities. And then from that, then we'll make the recommendations. But what is the priority of the group? Priority of the group is additional funding, support, additional funding, something to that effect. And then from that, then you make the recommendations about KDE will.
So could we put that in front? Would that be okay to add support, additional funding for gifted education? Provides support, I'm not sure what is appropriate.
What about emphasize? We recommend the emphasis.
So again, we're doing like an umbrella, right? What is the priority for the next several meetings gonna be that we're gonna make recommendations from, right? So one of them is about funding. What about funding that you want either increased or additional, equitable? I think that's one of the words that needs to be talked about. Is it additional? Is it increased? Is it equitable? Anyway, so emphasize whatever verb y'all want to use there.
Do we want to suggest at least the minimum, maybe not, but do the discussion? Are we at the discussion part? I'm sorry.
Well, she made the motion, so we can have further discussion. Yes.
Okay. Do we want to suggest a minimum, like a certain percentage increase, or I mean, if they add a few $1,000s, are we going to be happy with that? Because
I think you would do that in your recommendation, Brent.
Okay, so
We want to have something really broad at this point from which we make recommendations from.
but something that is okay, is big enough to make recommendations with it. Because, and that
That's a good
certainly
question.
is.
So I guess we just need to decide on what word y'all want to use here. You know, from the motion.
I would like to recommend we use remove additional and add.
Thoughts on that?
Are you okay with that?
I'm absolutely okay with that.
So what we're voting on is, well,
Right, which is,
yeah.
do we want to support? Do we want to provide? Do you want to emphasize? I guess y'all
Do we
need
want to request? And then look at the recommendations for getting there.
We can say request.
I thought you said we could. We can say.
Ultimately, KDE does have legislative priorities before a legislative session. And as was suggested, there are ways to move into that. And that's a long process. So even for the next legislative session, it's what one would be doing currently.
Started in, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. We started in June
It's a long process.
and it goes before the Kentucky board. They ultimately choose their priorities in the ABRs that they want to put forth to the legislators. So and so there's that whole vetting and then presenting, and then they have a lot of time to consider what will be their top priorities.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Katie.
Well, I guess I was just thinking, the idea of like, just, if we just say our priority is to request funding, increase funding. It feels narrower than if we say our priority is to support an increase in funding. Like, it feels like there are more action items that we could do in support of something. Whereas if we say request, then we just have to roll through this really complicated and long process of requesting funding, which might be one of the things that we want to do as a recommendation. Does this make sense? Okay, so I guess I would maybe advocate for a broader verb so that our recommendations could be more varied.
So read it as you would see it, and we'll see it all in accepts it.
So perhaps the wording could be to support. How did you say it, Katie? To support increased funding for GT.
Our priority is to support increased funding for GT education.
I think that is broad enough to
We have a request.
actually have that request
Can I just?
and more.
I will say that, but then I just wonder if what has now become priority two, if it makes more sense is to be one of the things under this overreaching priority rather than its own standalone. What about equitable funding and all that? Would that fit more under this overall increased funding umbrella?
I see it
Or
as
does
two
it still need
different
to be-
things because equal is not always equitable. So if you get an increased funding, but there's not a metric for assuring that all areas of Kentucky have equitable access, then I personally see this two different things.
Any other discussion before we vote on making this priority one? All those,
I'm sorry.
oh,
I'm not sure why it would hurt to just put an and in there to combine that. I know you're saying it's different, but whatever we get, we're going to make sure it's used equitably. So it's not like we're going to do one without the other.
Yeah, an and would be fine as long as that language is in there.
Oh, no, I didn't mean combine them. I just was wondering if that, I don't know what number it is now, the equitable funding socioeconomic priority, if it made more sense to be now like a recommendation somehow under this overall funding priority. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I just don't know if it
Yes.
makes sense to have multiple funding main priority, whereas it seems would kind of fall under this overall
Yes.
increased. And then one of your recommendations is to make sure that increased funding is equitable across all.
That makes sense.
And like, and maybe not.
this is very important discussion.
That would leave us with two priorities.
I guess so. Yeah, if that made sense, but it may not.
So are we ready to vote? Why don't you
We're just
read
voting on
like
changing,
it
yeah.
is? And
Okay.
let-
So the motion now is to support the increased funding for gifted and talented education.
All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Over to
So
priority number 2, which is educating teachers and parents on identification recommendations for students showing leadership or characteristics.
and who has a motion to change that by?
I think the thought was to change it to not just leadership. Discussing.
Yes.
You said it, but
I like to see leadership mentioned because it's often overlooked, but I think there could be a combining. So to say students showing leadership characteristics and other characteristics as needed, and other gifted categories as needed.
Could that be the recommendation? Like the umbrella could be the overall identification recommendation for students showing gifted characteristics, and the recommendation be specific to leadership, creativity, arts.
Yeah.
So that's
nice.
right.
Yeah.
motion it.
I make the motion that,
Yes.
While we're gone.
that we change the language to priority number 2 to include all aspects of gifted characteristics instead of just leadership.
Could you just make the motion what you want it to say?
Yes, what do
You
we
do
want it
that.
to say? Just-
So it would be educating parents and teachers on identification or reputation for students showing gifted and talented
characteristics.
rather than just the leadership specific. Yeah.
Is there a second? to the motion?
I'll say.
Is there discussion as the motion?
Sorry, who's second?
Sorry.
Hearing none,
Teachers and parents.
all those in favor of making priority 2 read what I assume is behind me.
So I haven't got it all up there. Can you read it one more time?
Educating teachers and parents on identification and recommendations for students showing gifted and talented characteristics. Teachers.
Yes. Wanting to skip over discussion, is there any? All those in favor of the motion say aye. And all those opposed say nay. The motion carries. Is there a third priority?
I think we need to go back and maybe consider if number 3 needs its own number. If it needs to stay as its separate number, or if it should fall under priority 1. Is equitable funding something that should be a recommendation under that overall umbrella of supporting increased funding, or is it something that deserves sort of its own?
I think
Yeah.
it should be separate.
Okay.
Just because we're asking, if you may not get extra funding.
Yeah.
But you still want to make equitable funding and resources a priority as well. We may have a small pie, but we need to be fair about it, even if it is small. But that's just,
And I think since we lost the resources with priority 1, that's an important to, if we keep priority 3 to include that word. I think you said it.
so I'm gonna go back and make my motion again. We merge those.
I like that. I'd rather see it merged so we have a different priority. I don't want to see all our priorities just revolving around money. Because there's other things that I think are also important dealing with socio-emotional needs and vehicle, making sure the delivery mechanisms are in place. I don't want it to seem like we're just focusing on money. So I like the idea of going back and adding resources to the funding and just making that a good.
Sorry, I was trying to, I think what you need to do is make a motion that the
motion you made previously to combine the two, that just be moved to priority 3 is what I think we're missing in
I will
this.
make that motion that once again.
Because it was
look at
priority
that
1 and 3 being combined, yeah.
To make it priority 3. Or, no,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
we made 1, the overall funding is 1, and 2, stay the educating. So then, yeah, you would need to make your combined motion about funding and resources 3, I believe.
Do you have it written?
I have it. You said equitable funding and resources for all
Right.
socioeconomic geographic groups and districts.
Yes.
Oh,
So
I thought you were saying to go back to the one we made number 1 and adding
No,
resources.
no,
to
no,
that.
no,
You're not-
equitable funding and resources, number 3, just merge one, the old 1 and 3 together. See up there,
The old one and the old 3,
right, merge them together into a new number 3,
a new number 3. So you still want one.
to be the funding, that one.
So we created a whole new 1.
Okay.
We tweaked 2, and then previously she had combined 1 and 3, but now we got rid of that 1. So now they have become the new 3,
Exactly.
I think.
So we're not gonna have that under, because we, along the way, we said maybe putting that under the general. You all don't want to see that, want to see it as a term.
I think by adding and resources and the recommendations of that, that would give us a lot of opportunity to talk about different things that could be added in that, in the number.
You could have resources for social,
So.
for social
That
emotional
motion.
needs and things.
Are you making that motion?
I am making that motion.
I second.
So give me the language.
So I have said that Kim has made motion that her previous verbiage for the former priority 1 be used for priority 3, which is equitable funding and resources for all socioeconomic geographic groups, districts.
Is there discussion of that motion?
I agree with this motion. However, would it be necessary for us to use the same verbiage we used in number 1 and begin our sentence with to support equitable funding? Is that necessary or not necessary?
Yeah, because this one has educated as a verb.
Yeah, I
Just
just think
one
we don't
verb.
have a verb. We need a verb.
Anybody support from that was on this board.
Is there further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes.
I like to see all this one.
We have 3 priorities that resemble what we had previously, but are more open than they were, which provides many opportunities for us to make recommendations under each of them, which I think will be the important work that we do throughout the rest of the year.
So before we go any further, that was really good discussion, by the way, great job. We probably should vote on the minutes. Go back and go back and do that so that we can have that, where we can post that to our webpage. So everybody had a chance to kind of look over that except for, yeah.
Is there a motion to accept the minutes either with changes or absence?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a motion, a second?
I'll second.
Anna? Any discussion? All those in favor of accepting the motions as written, say yay.
Yeah.
Those opposed, nay. We certainly accept the minutes as they've been presented.
So the next part of our work together today is to make the recommendations that we've kind of alluded to already this morning. So there's 3 recommendations, so that means that y'all can work in groups of 3 or 4. I'll let you just kind of go to whichever, y'all just group up by each poster. You can either write on the poster if you want to, or you can brainstorm on the graphic organizer I've given you and then write on the poster, however y'all want to do that. I've got almost 10 o'clock and we need to adjourn at 11. So I think maybe we can work for, let's say, maybe 15 or 20 minutes or so, and we come back together as a group, and then we share out and, make motions and that type of thing. Come back. Does that sound good to you guys?
It does. And do we have new paper we can?
Yeah.
add to this?
Yeah.
Just, I hope we have more recommendations than this face of paper.
I would suggest that today you focus on maybe just one or two recommendations rather than a whole bunch, just kind of keep it to one or two.
Get started. Let's do it.
So I don't know which, group you want to work in. But just divide and conquer, and I'll give you some more paper and markers if you need them. So about 3 or 4 people at each one. Choose the one you want to work on. Yeah. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people.
It's about 30.
Plan all considered.
He works in greens. You can put me down on the side. It's about me that. It's
The big.
Where do you-
either at 2 or 1.
There's 2.
Co-teacher just finished. And two. If I mean, to Jane, yeah, just a couple weeks after.
Yes, but that's. Same day, just last night. It's this, an experience. Thanks very much. Yeah. But this group, we do in the sharpening list, we have it. That's right. Okay.
But is there, so if we decide this year.
So you later. Have good one.
That's not all.
Or, yeah,
The trigger. They say. Like, I guess.
Yes.
Yes. So it's not.
Yes. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's why I use interim, because that's organization.
This, this.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
And I'll just leave it at clear.
that's bring a recommendation. It's to.
But I didn't want that to all.
But you go ahead and write it down.
To.
Districts. But what is it that you? If you want to recommend that there be a review of the resources that are on the KDWA page, no, I just updated. So it's not like- Yeah. Right there.
To get resources on that page, that's not right.
And I just, some of those resources that go on.
It's so different.
Okay.
So there was sensitivity
To see
all the things.
what data we need to examine this data. Would be.
I think therefore, you have right resources. Like the differentiation. of the regulations and the trackers.
Yeah.
You know, that means. I think it's a good recommendation. You could say that, you know, teachers. Be ready to go to review. That like sort of resources, GC researchers, reviewers, that's not. That could be a recommendation. Well, no, it's just.
I don't know that having a list with teachers. Funding on it.
Yeah, it's consistency across districts.
Well, see, and I see this as, I mean, equity wise. It's funding.
And so it's because the regulation. That, you know.
It doesn't capture.
Screening. Identification of the officers. You know,
So-
maybe there needs to be some training. Try to be. Maybe I need to consider that. That's a big right.
You know, we just.
Several.
That's not.
Okay.
You know.
So long.
6% of everybody is teachers.
I don't know if that's helpful.
It just,
You gotta get us some bus drivers run the regular routes, so you're not really
So.
I know.
So across looking at PSA,
Which resources I found the most.
KD offers grants to districts to support.
Oh, we look at, we look
And
at
math is not.
data drives, yes.
After someone they do, so I think I need grants on the back track. So I get evaluation, they need to trust this. And then I up for the books.
I don't know. I don't really know. But that's a good suggestion. You know, that, do an evaluation, send out an evaluation, or evaluate. So, you know, helps.
We're looking at it, it's like the other signature visual generator list.
That's what it is. There are lots of years that are censure.
Right, and I, everybody. That's no day. There's showing up.
No,
No, but yeah, we look at all kinds of things.
Yeah, there's a different things. So, well, Title I, yeah, that, I mean, that's.
You know, when it comes to trainings and things like that, and like what she's saying, around the surveys.
It's something. Issue.
Yeah, I think that's some really good recommendations.
Keep reading data, show us the data.
Especially if
I'm in a little different state of mind than usual, so I don't write this down.
Like we could add,
We recommend a commitment to data collection, supports
I guess CPE.
budget process.
Which isn't a bad.
What's there? I think that's the one.
I think AI.
But no, I haven't, it gave me a start. I haven't, look, I haven't talked about it. I've been over there using ChatGPT for everything. It can,
You've got a good point.
I mean,
And then that's why we have it.
but we're trying to combine data collection with funding. So when we all go away, right, and a new group of members, so that we're leaving them the foundation of a relationship with KDE for formalized funding. Is that what we're getting at? It's trying to come up with
Access to equity.
praise.
It's that. As it pertains to this. You're talking about, yes, that's so in order to do it,
We need to.
We don't have access
to it.
What data?
Create criteria.
Review our survey, you know,
How could that be?
it's gonna be me. Reaching out, I'm just trying to think how this is gonna go. If it were, make all the recommendations.
And that would, I guess, go to the audit, which I think.
This is.
Yeah, look at the data that's.
With the educators. It's amazing how big we have. And how we.
Right. They're.
It's
It's
system.
question.
The system.
And so.
And it's that to work.
It has to be.
My ability and apparently a lot of people's abilities, because individuals get what fit.
They currently go after this.
Very good.
Right.
There's no.
Extreme and extreme.
That's a work. That's absolutely. Getting those people. It's interesting.
So it looked like many other people had a base of some kind, and then they distributed the funds based on their total population.
I'll tell you why.
Increases years.
But at least.
Whereas if you just fund your numbers,
That's interesting. It's based on.
And that's gonna be.
It's in a pipeline. We're making.
this might all children. $20,000, then it's divided each for that $20,000 for each household. That's the from district to district. And that money is divided by children in your district. And that's what the funding for was.
It's embarrassing to say. This guy's a dashboard.
Of school districts, because she just submitted.
Full cells instead. It's.
She's got some good, I mean, there's,
It's.
like, I think the checklist, like you were mentioning. I got the-
Yeah.
Of the regulations.
If we need.
That would such whoever makes these decisions, what kind of data do they want to see?
Yes.
Yeah, this is the process to actually start looking at, what happens is legal.
I think the getting, well, I would start with, Dee Connor. And
That we have today.
because she sort of oversees the data.
Yeah, 3 surveys, or not surveys, but the 3 reports that we had to put in. I don't know if she's in the right report. Yes, I remember she asked for like specific questions, like you had to write up. I heard you had to write up like a paragraph. One else, my question is.
But yeah.
Okay. What about, I just,
Right.
Examine multiple data sources to support a centralized budget.
75% use.
It's in the planning, we change.
No, so this section, section of the sanction calls. See what she makes through. Okay, so. Like her district.
If what you all are saying from your perspective, you have data, it does not look at a conference. Well, there's Jesus today on Proclamation Day.
To provide.
For flexibility of funds to be there on student.
Oh, yeah.
For funds.
She's over the way.
And she had a great.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, she's been talking. Hey, wasn't she about it? She's good. Yeah, she's. You're right.
Is she performing? Is she speaking? Is she representing?
Right.
How.
She'll be here.
She'll be here.
That's right.
But.
And go. Right.
And I would say, if they am an empty in case. It's years like. I think it'll say it's done long. And as. You know, to say things like here.
Especially it's just how which is like the implementation. Here's like that perspective of this.
Just.
Yeah, that's a question on. Perfect. So I just on some of the things that they share. No.
Question. Implementation.
One of the questions used to be, you know, that ratio of teachers. Start discussing. With and the scale. They focus on something less heavy lift. But you know, how they were asked. They want this, you know, especially. That's awesome. Does that make sense? So you're all saying.
Yes, we can more, make the data more attainable.
Just, but they're not getting.
Which is basically, yes.
And implement whatever you look at.
Or maybe like. How is the
next one.
identify for these periods?
And how do you do this?
And that could be.
I know you told me your name. I'm sorry.
This is also.
So I'm gonna be saying this. Like everybody.
Recommend a process of comprehensive data.
I mean, that's what, I mean, you're. They can put it into, no, it's okay now, but I'm just saying that if I think that it's.
Hey, Mr. House.
Process.
It's, I like to, once I meet. How does your. I don't know. You reach.
Could be, yeah.
So maybe that's a 1 year.
27.
I don't think that's. Or the resources, like, that's fine. Or the resources, it's. Please, yes, these must have special, and it's amazing, here's the change.
Identify the data, the specific data.
So you you just what more.
And that could be what. It's a. Hold this.
I like. In my.
I don't know, I mean, it's like, how do you know that makes sense?
Like, still just explain, you know, dollars to technology, so they're not gonna get that. They're not gonna get it. We should include some, like, say,
That's not what's going to. It's too different. Well, it's definitely possible. I mean, yeah, so there's two.
It's a pretty much. Reflections data could be collected.
So, what did you find that dealt? So I think that's the teacher part.
Oh, yeah.
But if you step down to now recommendation for the parent. That's just.
So I'm just curious from your all's everyday work. What's a brainstorm that comes to mind that you would want to know that you don't already?
Kathy has the data. Okay. And then the next stuff, that doesn't look right either. Well, the difference. Yeah, it's stated.
Could be.
Well, I was gonna say. Right.
Just your parent surveys.
Yeah. Because like, what's the question? It might seem simple, but it's like, do you know where you take for GSSP? And I think it's not, and some people, and like, you know.
So does your, so we just.
Teaching.
We could say, yes, here. This could be.
So we use page request 1 to 3.
About just 3,000.
But we don't have the date. We don't know.
Okay, so that serves them.
Many districts have stays up on.
Well, there is no case law out. There is no case law. So evaluate the creation of the development.
What's appropriate. Yeah.
Or like, if you're.
You doesn't know what that's your survey is, you know, it's actually like, oh, you know. Because that's what I do, right? It's like, I need your.
In my experience.
Right. How
I worked in
the students are classified in regulations in terms.
like we celebrate it between. Like I've been thinking of students. To me, we're touching. I can't say that.
And then you want to talk.
Okay, I've got 10:21. So wrap up the sessions. Answer the next our students. I will share and service training.
So this, I think is like, because like you said, it will.
Scores that they're just identified. I mean, like students I was teaching, I tried to advocate for local forming. My district, when they had a flat area, which is great. Second story.
Students that we get additional.
Both identified.
And so then I, in my particular school, have a
But yeah, that's just say, yeah.
that we could be levels and find those
This year. That's in a reality check.
We will ask them how they're teachers, you know, how.
Okay.
We can talk through that. Yeah, get the break.
Right.
Another company.
Dr. Roberts, I guess what we need to do now is just to kind of clear out our recommendations and
Priority one, who in a good group would like to share with us?
I will share.
Oh, you will, good.
Byron, you go ahead.
Oh, thank you. We talked, just mostly a good conversation, around, since the process is geared toward the issue of funding, that, the possibility of developing a formal annual budget request for increased funding, that would be, and I used, the qualifier internal. So that's the KDE internal means of doing that. So if it was the wish to pursue that, then
yeah, this
It
is the
would-
ABR we get every year.
then it would need to be processed internally, but could come from the recommendations of this group and then filtered through the division. That's the internal aspect of going for the Kentucky Board for consideration. Obviously, there are external conversations with regard to funding as well. An important conversation, what is it? We're data rich, information poor, I think still remains very accurate. We have copious pieces of data, but telling the story with the data, collating the data is still lacking in general. So in order to have conversations around funding, then our lawmakers will come back and press and use the word data repetitively. They will say, show me what this means in Kentucky. So even if you're using national comparative data, they're going to say, and rightfully so, what does this mean on the ground in Kentucky? And unfortunately, that is not very clear and not readily available. So examine what data could be collected to support budget requests. And then, recommend an examination of the data sources which support formalized budget requests. So at least from just my personal experience, we have multiple data streams, and the data streams contain pieces of the narrative, but they're not designed to speak to one another. And so again, putting the pieces together is way more complicated than it sounds. However, we do have exorbitant amount of data coming in. It's just getting the conversations and the right people at the table that can help with the technical aspects of pulling the data together. And then getting further would be identify data that could be collected. So what data is available that we have now? And then what are we missing from that data? That would be more helpful in telling this.
And then from that, you might need to make a data request from Infinite Campus, because I've looked at the data. I won't go into all that, but we have school report card, which is the number of students per district. We know how much money districts are allocated. We don't know the number of teachers in each district and the caseloads that they have, that type of thing. So there are some things that we know. We know the average teacher salary is around $50,000, $55,000. So those are things that I have included in the ABR in the past when I've talked about needing more funds, right? But we don't really know the actual number of teachers. Anyway, that's getting in the weeds, but those are really good thoughts there.
And actually, what legislators are wanting to know is, what do we know about achievement for these
Yes. That's in the school report card as well. I believe that's broken down when you look at, but the issue is that if you have 10 or less students, right, in a subcategory, it won't be reported. So that would have to be an internal request, correct? To know, because we want to, we suppress that information for the privacy of students. Very good. All right, then we're over to two.
Please excuse the handwriting.
Listen, I think we're just going to kind of talk all together about this. So our brains were kind of going every which way. And so this is kind of how we funneled it. We thought, well, a way to help educate the teachers and the parents, I guess first you just need to see, do the teachers know this is what they should be doing? And Miss Kathy does a wonderful job speaking at like CAGE events. She does a new teacher beginning of the year. And she also gives us the 3 end of year reports. And so I found that very helpful because it kind of helps me to focus on, okay, this is what I need to work on for next year. And even like I take it very serious, my coworker and I, and so like we'll read the question and we say, we're doing this part, but we're not doing this part. So I have to answer no. And Miss Kathy will call and say, hey, Hannah, I've noticed you said no. Can you talk about it? And so sometimes just her conversation enlightens me to say, oh, yes, we are doing this. So first, I guess I was just asking teachers, are they, do they know, like it developed maybe to add some questions on the end of the year reports about how does your district gather recommendations for your students in these areas? And they might say, yeah, we do that. But then you could say maybe how, or how does your district implement your identification process? And then we kind of talked with Miss Kathy about the KDE has on their website resources. And I feel like some teachers use it. It's just like with everything else, some teachers don't. And so this kind of makes them have a reflection and asking them, have you utilized any of the resources on these links? And if so, what was the most helpful? So that would get your data, that would give Miss Kathy to see, okay, these are what they're looking at. But then going to the parent portion of this priority, we could ask them specifically, does your parent survey include this and this? And I know at the end of the year with us, we're like, and I mean, Miss Kathy, bless her heart, she sees, oh, Hannah England's calling me now. And it's like, oh, how do we get that information out to parents? And she's like, Hannah, you can do this, you can do that. So it's just first and foremost, having those conversations and having the teachers be aware, ooh, well, I thought I did, or maybe I need help with that. So that could just be a few questions added to the end of the year surveys that could help teachers start reflecting on, yes, we do it, but how are you doing it effectively in your implementation process?
And I think we all realize like what gets monitored gets checked and completed. So this is just a way to make sure that districts are aware and that these resources are out there. So it's like a gentle nudge because they will have to fill out the report and that will cause the desired effect, hopefully, of making sure they know about it. Even if they haven't attended the 5,000 trainings and,
Right.
even if they have to look at the 65 emails, they'll have to fill out the survey. So they'll see that that's a component that KDE cares about.
So our first one was looking at that. This was the equitable funding and resources. KDE creates a task force to study allocation of equitable funding for all school districts. We felt that would be the first step to making recommendations or to changes is if they actually looked at how that was done. And the second one was KDE reviews the language of current regulation regarding 75% allocation to certified staff to allow for flexibility of funds to be spent on certain student services. And again, like if we get more funding, then 75%, it still is tying up some funds that might be spent in another way to provide resources for students or student services. And then we just kept going. KDE financially incentivizes teachers to acquire GT endorsement to combat current shortage. So, in Harlan County, you can't find a gifted teacher anywhere, even when they were ready to pay tuition for them. It's really hard to find a teacher who is certified, has that endorsement. So I felt like that was something KDE has done in the past to get math teachers or to get special ed teachers. They've provided opportunities to get those endorsements. And then KDE evaluate and develop guidelines for appropriate caseload. And with resources being the teacher is the greatest resource those students are going to come in contact with. I wouldn't want to be maybe I wouldn't want to be a gifted teacher if I knew I had a caseload of 570 students staring me in the face. But if we look and we're not saying regulate at this point, that would come later, but have some guidelines and say, 350 is more than enough for any one teacher to adequately, some sort of guidelines. And then KDE requires gifted, talented training for general ed teachers through professional development, and really requires that, and maybe even pre-service teachers to be added, because that one teacher that's has 570 students is the next best thing is a classroom teacher who needs some training and gifted and talented as well. So that's kind of our thinking through there. Oh, we ran out of time. Way to come up with more if you wanted.
Well, we said to focus on one or two, so y'all did good.
Stated expectations. Well, we had mini grants up there, but I think we forgot to put that up there. That maybe KDE could have provide mini grants so that schools who offer Title I or we can't come up with the right name could apply so that they could take their students somewhere, so that those who have lived too far away from cultural site or something, that they would be.
Or even inner city, just those that don't have alternative funding sources.
So, okay.
Well, I shared out, so y'all want to make a motion and have some more discussion? How do you want to do this?
The motion.
To accept the recommendation?
I don't think we're at that point. I think we just suggested them right now that would be something that we need to come back and.
Is it possible, take a picture of each group and for us right now before we adjourn to say which group we worked with? So it has some think time before April, or if we had question time, we could send them to you or Dr. Julia so that you all could come up, an answer to the questions. And then in April, we decide exactly the language and adopt the recommendations.
And almost prioritize those that's direct.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Where do you need to start? Because there's a lot that's up here on.
So, Kurt, you might need to make a motion that we do that, and then we discuss it.
I move that we take images of the 3 working groups, attach the council members' names who work in those groups today, and for the coordinator and the chair to work together to disseminate that to council members at least 4 weeks prior to the next meeting.
A second.
Is there anything? Okay, is there a second?
Thanks.
Then discussion?
I think I discussed before I made a motion, but I would like some think time because I only worked with one group, so I'm not exactly sure what the other, and if I know who I can reach out to, Hannah was a part of that group, then we could email or communicate, like, what does this really mean when you all were talking? And then if I had questions before the meeting, I could send those to Kathy or Dr. Julia for you all to have a response to the group. And I think we need to take action before the end of the school year to formalize the
Really
recommendation.
important to move it forward.
Yeah.
Do it.
Maybe start with document, a Google Doc where, so the owners for each priority would be on that. And you can maybe submit your questions directly on there. Keep it living in.
Would you want to add that then to the motion that a Google Doc be created for members to review and comment on?
I accept that as a friendly amendment.
You literally 15 minutes, like take a picture, put the picture on.
We could do both.
I think it would be easier for y'all to see something in black and white. And especially if you want to comment, ask questions, whatever, to have a Google Doc that people have access to that they can, you know.
I think we'd be wise as a council to note that sine die will happen right before our next meeting, so we may have information that affects education as a whole. So having this already in mind in case there's in case there's something that you need to bring to our attention at the meeting.
Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. You're up next.
Next, we've got the state gifted education update. That's me. All right, so the current projects that I'm working on are guidance. We have a frequently asked questions gifted and talented document that was collaborated on with members from this group many years ago. And as things change and evolve, I looked at that. There were some things that just need to be updated. So I'm working to update the frequently added questions guidance. I mean, I looked at the data, we talked about data today. I mean, that document got a lot of clicks and a lot of look at. Training. As far as training, I'm looking looking at updating the end of year training. Every year we provide end of year training for districts in order to support them with how to submit the end of year reports that are required by regulation for them to submit. Also, I've been working on some differentiation strategies for classroom teachers through monitoring. That's something that continually comes up is when I talk to classroom teachers that they would like some training on differentiation. Not that districts aren't doing a good job, because I know that many of you that work in the districts are working to try to provide support for the teachers that work with your gifted students, because we know that students aren't just gifted during pull-out time, they're gifted all the time, and they need that support in the classroom. Also, I'm doing monitoring. That started a couple of weeks ago. So I'm working to monitor those districts that we talk about, from the regulation. And they report back, like Hannah was saying, she and Miss Susie look at that every year, and they're very white and black about it. Yes, we do, or no, we don't. And so that's what districts will answer usually on many of the questions is yes or no. And if they answer no, then I go back during the summer and I try to follow up and provide technical assistance. So this is the time of year that I go and I verify. Well, if you said yes on there, are you doing what you said you do? And I'm happy to report many districts are. They're working very hard to support the students that are in their classrooms every day to the best of their ability. So that's what we're doing right now. Any questions about that? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just curious. How do teachers tend to feel when you call them during their summer break, asking them what questions about
I usually try to do it not during their summer break. I I evaluate or disseminate the information I get during the summer. And then I usually wait to the beginning of school and say, hey, I noticed that you answered no on this question. Is there a reason you answered no? Sometimes it's they clicked it wrong, you know, and sometimes they just need technical assistance. So that's a good question.
And I would like to add, she is very approachable and that helps us. Like, I mean, I appreciate you, Miss Kathy, and like, I don't feel like you're in trouble. You're going to the principal's office. I feel like, oh, hey, did you mean this? Or how can we help with this? And so so it is. And I feel like other people would agree with me on that.
The monitoring process, having gone through it is very helpful as well. And it gives you, I mean, we had a meeting this week and we've talked about the monitoring process and how we were able to make some, we were able to identify some areas of growth. We were able to identify some strengths and we were able to identify some areas of growth and we've implemented those. And honestly, it's very helpful. And then some of us work in the summer. So.
But I know we had a Javits grant several years ago and I was audited for that along with the other people that were a part of that process. And I know that being monitored is a very scary, anxiety-ridden type of thing. So I always try to keep that in the front of my mind whenever I go to monitor, is that these people are working really hard. If there's some things they can improve on, they want to know about that. I try not to look at it as this is my time to say, oh, you're not doing X, because that's not the purpose of it at all. It's to provide support. Technical assistance is the way I look at it.
Kim?
So since our last meeting, we haven't had a board meeting at Cage, but since I missed the last meeting, that might be we did talk about it. In October, Allison Mefford, the executive director of Cage, and Julie Roberts and Toddy, right, went to speak to the Joint Committee on Education, and Julie provided what they had said to advocate for more funding, increased funding for gifted education when the budget comes up for renewal this year. I don't know how that went, but I guess we'll know in a few weeks. We'll see how eloquent they were. The other thing is that we have a Cage conferences coming up on the 26th and 27th at Griffin Gate in Lexington at the Marriott there. So if you haven't registered, we've got really good sessions ready. Kathy will be presenting and Julia's got a couple. The other thing, we really don't talk about it much, but Cage has the Cage Foundation, which provides scholarships. They raise money specifically for providing scholarships for students at all ages, not just high school, to attend enrichment, educational enrichment things, Bambi, and I always want to say Scampy, but Bambi, but sometimes there are local camps or different things going on, and so they will provide funding for whatever funds that they have. And I just wanted to make the board aware of that was an opportunity for students to apply to. I think that's really, with that foundation, there is the Lynette Baldwin Scholarship for teachers to attend some things. So that's new also. That's will be out this year, short while. So that's everything.
Thank you, Kim.
Well, let me tell you what's happening at the national level, and there's quite a bit happening. I've been co-chair of the revision of initial teacher standards in gifted ed. And we have worked on that 2.5 years and think we just sent the final version off to the Council for Exceptional Children. So if you hear a hoop and a holler from Bowling Green, it will be because we heard we've done it, and that's fine. So why are standards important for teachers? Well, it gives credibility to the field. You don't have any standards. NHEC has programming standards K through 12, which are really important guidelines for us. But standards for teachers are also incredibly important. So that's going on. I always kind of bring a folder of things going on at the center, and that isn't necessarily national, except in a way it is. The talent search tip Kentucky is really way beyond Kentucky's. Duke tip closed 2020, long time ago now. And we didn't want to miss that opportunity for Kentucky teachers. And so we have above level testing with the ACT. And by the way, ACT had dropped completely, offering the opportunity for 13-year-olds and under. So we've had to work hard with ACT to get that up and going again. And so for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, we have IXL as the above level assessment. But for 7th and 8th graders, it's ACT or SAT. And we've done programming, which is the second part of the talent search model, with the third being recognition. And we had our first TIP Kentucky recognition last September. We will do it again in May to switch the seasons. We're doing that. So everyone ought to know that's available. If you are doing the state assessment, it's got a ceiling on it. It doesn't show us where our students who are advanced are able to move. And I'm going to take a minute to share something else with you that I was sharing with the interim commissioner, and I'm sharing as broadly as I know how. I wrote an op-ed that was in the Courier in December, looking at the importance of advanced math opportunities. North Carolina, for 5 years now, has been implementing a process where the students who, and this is 3rd through 12th grade, the students who score at the top level on the state math assessment are put into advanced math classes. And so they have to opt out of being there rather than opting in. And this week, a policy review that Jonathan Plucker did, I don't know why I don't have copies of this. I'll see that it's sent out to you with a link. North Carolina has absolutely changed the achievement of kids. Those would be data that would be really important for us to have if we were doing it. And I certainly will be advocating with our legislators to opt out of advanced math rather than opting in. Don't know where it'll go this year, but if someone asks you about it, I would want you to know what it is. Kentucky cannot lag behind, and we're lagging behind. Any questions on that one?
If you happen to have some information, I can do my own research, but do you happen to recall any demographics with the students who did well on those exams?
Actually, it's all in this policy brief. And I'll send the link to you all so you can send that out to everyone here. It's been an incredible success. About 5 other states have done parts of that. North Carolina has done it all. Who wants to be beaten by North Carolina or any place else? We've got smart kids, but if you don't, just thinking about it for a moment, if you don't do advanced math, you do what everybody else can do. You're not ready for advanced math. And I think it's Peters who did the research with a whole lot of other people, looking at a 5th grade heterogeneously grouped math class. And what would be the range of achievement in a heterogeneously grouped 5th grade class? About 2nd grade.
Yep. I would say anywhere from first or second grade to eighth grade, probably.
So you have an impossible job for a teacher to see that everybody's learning every day. It's the best reason for grouping for instructional purposes, as our regulation says we shall do. If you don't have the advanced math kids learning together, the teacher probably will work with other kids. So
Is there a standard definition of advanced math? Because wouldn't that depend on what's offered at their school? Some people might consider algebra 3 advanced, whereas some schools consider calculus as advanced. Is there a standard?
I don't know that that's the case.
Okay.
The Ed Trust has done a whole lot of work on this topic, and at the key conference, the first keynote will be done by educator from Ed Trust. The conference will be a great place to be to stay up to date.
I'm just really excited about that opt-out instead of opt-in, because I have physically seen that firsthand with a student years ago at our middle school, because he didn't get the notes sent home, because the parents didn't answer the phone call. He wasn't put into the advanced math class, even though he had the highest math score there was in his grade. And when talking to the principal, they're like, well, we sent information out. And I just thought that that was ridiculous. Like, you're going to keep them out. Like, it aggravates. So I'm really excited about that.
We just have to do.
Okay, it really breaks down those barriers.
Yes.
Sorry. Karen.
No, go ahead, right ahead. I was just gonna ask, I'm just out of curiosity, if you had this conversation with Representative Tipton, because he has House Bill 162.
I have not, but I will. I have had this conversation with Senator Giffords,
So,
and I know him well enough to say, when you were in Mr. Kessler's math class, you and Bruce Kessler and another boy learned advanced math in the back of the class while the others learned, which is true.
well, the House Bill 162 is centered around math instruction in Kentucky. So I would think that would be an optimal time to discuss that if you could get that language added.
I shall do that, and I'm also, Pritchard Committee's working on this, as to where we can add it, and it's just a step forward. And of course, the real concern is, do we have enough teachers to teach advanced math? And the question is not, do we have, well, maybe enough teachers of math, but it's really, they would be teaching math at a different level in most cases. But thanks, I'll make sure I do that.
So that's, which senator is sponsoring that?
Tipton.
Tipton. Bill 162.
Yeah, and he's chair of House Education.
Right.
So,
It's important, folks. People ask me all the time, why don't you retire? And I say, it's important. We've got to keep doing it. We've got to get people thinking about how do we elevate education in Kentucky so that even our brightest kids learn every day in school. Okay, I think that's all that's on my list.
Your closing remark, Dr. Vernon.
And that's my closing remark. Let's opt out rather than. So, closing remarks. Misty.
All right. This is just a reminder, I'll be sending you an exit slip for the meeting. And at this time, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Second.
We will see you April 17th virtually.